I worked 2 jobs for 10 years to give him the best education possible. His parents were traveling the world during that time. I sat in the back row and listened as he never mentioned my name. The next day, I canceled the trust fund I had set up in his name to pay for college. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. I'm Margaret, Maggie to most, and I'm 64 years old with bad knees, a stubborn streak, and a very expensive collection of tuition receipts. You'd be surprised how much paper 10 years of private school generates. Glossy brochures, capital campaign letters, and monthly bills that made me queasy the first dozen times and numb the 100th. I kept them all in a fireproof box next to my will and the deed to my little ranch house. People collect postcards or spoons from the places they travel. I collected proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I did what I said I did. If you asked me a decade ago why I would put myself through all this, I would have told you it was simple. Benjamin, my nephew, had the kind of smile that made you believe in yourself. At 8 years old, he was a lean, freckled kid with a cowlick and a laugh that came from his belly. He'd curl up on my couch with a library book about space and whisper facts like they were secrets. Aunt Maggie, did you know Saturn could float in water if you had a tub big enough? Hawthorne Prep had a real science lab, a robotics club, and teachers who weren't exhausted by class sizes that looked like a county fair line. I had a steady job at the county records office, a second gig doing books for Whitman's Hardware, and a whole lot of love I didn't have the chance to spend on a child of my own. Sometimes life hands you a do-over you never asked for. Sometimes you take it anyway. My sister, Sabrina, was always the wind. She blew in, charmed everyone, and blew out again. Her husband, Derek, had that grin people confuse with competence and a passport full of stamps they like to accidentally leave on the coffee table at family gatherings. "We're giving Ben the world," Sabrina would coo, brushing invisible lint off a silk scarf. Experiences are so much more valuable than things. That sounded lovely coming from two people who weren't paying for any of those things. It started small. A rough year, a temporary setback. Could I cover the entrance fees just this once? Then a layoff, a promising startup, an investment that just needed a few more months. They sold me their dream of a world-hopping childhood, and all I could see was Ben stuck in a patchwork of public schools that honestly didn't have a fair shot, not in our district. He deserved a shot. I had one to give. I didn't realize I wasn't just paying for school, I was underwriting a brand. Hawthorne Prep loved parents like Sabrina and Derek. Sleek, witty, camera-ready at school fundraisers. "We're so proud of our son," Sabrina would say on the gala stage, wearing a dress she later tagged #gifted on Instagram. "We believe in giving back." Derek shook hands like a politician. When the head of school needed a couple of volunteers to host the spring auction, guess who raised manicured hands? Not the woman in sensible flats counting every coupon out of a worn accordion folder. Not the aunt with ink smudges on her fingertips balancing ledgers. I didn't care about the spotlight. Truly, I didn't. But you can only hear "we" so many times before you start to wonder who "we" is. I made peace with my choice by treating it like a mortgage. I cut my cable, learned the dark art of coupon stacking, and became a connoisseur of thrift store racks. On Saturdays, after bookkeeping, I'd swing by the fancy bakery that threw out their day-old baguettes and ask if they'd happen to have any extras. They always did. On Sundays, I meal prepped like I was going into battle. My treats were small: dollar movie matinees, a single good lipstick that made me feel like I had slept more than 5 hours. My friends didn't get it, not at first. "Mags, he's not your responsibility." I just smile and say, "He's family." I learned later that family is a word both incredibly heavy and paper thin.
The first tuition bill was a shock. The fifth was a routine. By the second year, I had set up an education trust, revocable in my name, so that my payments flowed in a clean line the school could understand. Later, I opened a 529 plan, too. The banker was young enough to be my grandson. He explained everything in a sing-song, and I nodded politely while thinking about how many shifts at Whitman's it would take to cover the recommended minimum contributions. I set up automatic transfers, labeled the folder Ben's College in thick black marker, and taped a photo of him on the inside flap. He's grinning, front teeth too big for his face, holding a blue ribbon from the science fair. That picture carried me through nights when I was too tired to change out of my work clothes and would wake up with a crease from my name badge pressed into my cheek. I didn't keep my contributions a secret, but I didn't broadcast them either. If someone at school asked, I'd say, "No, I help where I can." The problem is that silence is a wide open space where other people build their own stories. By middle school, the narrative had calcified. Sabrina and Derek were the jet-setting, generous parents, and I was the frumpy aunt who baked brownies for bake sales. I decided I could live with being underestimated. There's a certain power in it. But some things I couldn't swallow. Like the year the school launched a capital campaign for a new arts center. They sent out glossy flyers promising a donor wall with plaques etched in bronze. I wrote a check I felt in my bones, then watched at the unveiling as a brushed metal rectangle read, "The Stone Family, in gratitude." That was Sabrina's married name. She stood beside Derek, beaming, and thanked the head of school with 2 air kisses. I waited for some acknowledgement, a mention, anything, nothing. When I pulled the development director aside later, she shuffled papers and said, "We appreciate every family's contributions," with a smile that had end-of-day fatigue baked in. The Stones are our named donors this year. I went home and ate a day-old baguette like it was penance. Ben, well, he grew up. That's the thing about kids. They turn into people when you aren't looking. He got tall and quiet, with a gentleness that made teachers love him and classmates gravitate toward him. He captained the robotics team and tutored 6th graders in math. He hugged me hello, and he texted me, "Got home safe," after I nagged him about it. He was a good kid. I won't pretend otherwise. I'm not here to villainize him. I'm here to tell the truth. Senior year arrived like a stampede. College tours, AP exams, endless emails about last chance to donate to the senior gift. Sabrina's Instagram became a highlight reel of campuses and latte art. Derek discovered LinkedIn posts about raising high-achieving children and shared them like scripture. I kept paying the tuition. I kept adding to the trust. And because I am who I am, I kept printing the receipts. Graduation day was a sunburn waiting to happen. I wore a linen dress from Goodwill and my good church sandals. The stadium bleachers were hot enough to fry an egg. I sat in the back row because I learned a long time ago that I like exits. I watched Ben fidget with his cap, watched Sabrina angle Derek's phone to catch his good side, and watched the head of school mispronounce 3 names, then performatively apologize. When it was Ben's turn to speak, valedictorian, our boy, he took a breath and launched into a speech on resilience and community and gratitude. It was a good speech. It would have been a great one if not for 15 seconds that I have replayed more times than I care to admit. He said, "I want to thank my parents. They've worked so hard to give me the best. They're my role models, my rock, my everything." He gestured to the VIP section where Sabrina dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin she'd slipped into her clutch. He said, "I wouldn't be here without them." Not a mention. Not a nod. Not a sideways and my aunt. I stared at the programs in my lap and watched the sun bleach the ink. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that we don't do things for applause. But let me tell you something I learned later than I wish I had. Gratitude isn't applause, it's truth. And the absence of it, that's a lie. After the ceremony, Sabrina squeezed me and said, "Oh my God, wasn't he amazing?" Derek clapped me on the shoulder like a Little League coach. Ben hugged me, awkward in his gown. He said, "Thank you for coming, Aunt Maggie," and moved on to the next person with a camera.
That night, I made tea, opened my fireproof box, lifted out the trust documents, and placed them on the kitchen table. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the oven clock, the world's most judgmental metronome. I read the trust language again, tracing the paragraphs with a finger like a schoolgirl. Revocable. Grantor, Margaret Lane. Trustee, also me. Primary beneficiary, Benjamin Stone. Contingent beneficiary, to be directed upon revocation. It's funny how the future can sit there in black and white while you're still deciding how much of yourself you're willing to spend. I slept badly. In the morning, I put on my county office blazer and drove to the bank. The same bank where a boy with perfect hair had walked me through my options years ago. This time, I got a woman with a silver streak and a firm handshake. "Ms. Lane," she said, scanning the documents, "you understand what you're doing." I nodded. She didn't ask why. She just moved through the steps with professional grace. I signed where she told me to sign. The trust dissolved like sugar in hot tea. The 529? I didn't close it. I changed the beneficiary. I told the banker where I wanted the funds redirected and under what conditions. I made other arrangements, clean, legal, painstaking, because my revenge wasn't a tantrum. It was a budget. By lunch, I had done it. I walked out into the blinding summer light feeling both hollowed out and weirdly buoyant, like I'd traded in a boulder I'd been carrying for 10 years for a helium balloon I wasn't sure I deserved. On the way home, I passed Hawthorne Prep. They were taking down the graduation banners. A maintenance man stood on a ladder with a drill between his knees. I parked, uninvited, and walked into the development office where the donor wall glittered in the hallway like a jewelry display. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked without looking up. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here about an error on your donor plaques." The development director remembered me. Hard to miss the aunt who brings brownies and bites her tongue. I laid out a thin stack of copies. Tuition payments with my account numbers, donation receipts with my signature, emails confirming pledges I had fulfilled. "The Stone family," I said, tapping the plaque with my index finger, "did not write these checks." The director skimmed the papers, then took a long look, then looked at me. She didn't argue. She said, "We'll need to review this." I said, "Of course. I'll leave copies." Then I wrote in tidy block letters on a sticky note, "Please correct attribution. If you need the originals, my attorney will bring them." I didn't have an attorney, not then. But people don't question a woman with a good pen, a tidy stack of evidence, and a voice that sounds like she's done apologizing for existing. I drove home, fed the cat, and answered 3 emails from Gloria about her tomato plants. I ignored 2 texts from Sabrina, "Brunch at 11 tomorrow, Ben wants to see everyone," and "Bring that peach cobbler if you can." Then I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall. If I'm honest, part of me hoped Ben would call, that he'd say, "Aunt Maggie, I messed up," and we'd untangle it together. He didn't call. The next day, I went to brunch anyway. Not for the quiche or for Sabrina's curated playlist titled Cap and Gown, but because I wanted to look my nephew in the eye and measure the space between what he believed and what was true. Their house looked like a lifestyle blog exploded. Balloons bobbed, a gold 2025 banner drooped above an artful spread of bagels and lox Sabrina definitely sourced from a place that uses the word artisan too much. Derek poured mimosas like he was auditioning for a role as Fun Dad number 2. People milled, admired the framed diploma, and told stock stories about "remember when?" I waited until the crowd thinged and found Ben on the back deck, leaning on the railing, squinting into the sun. "Hey, kiddo," I said. The word slipped out of habit. He smiled, tired. "Hey, Aunt Maggie." I took a breath. "I gave a beautiful speech yesterday." He flushed. "Thanks." I was nervous. Another breath. It felt like standing at the edge of a diving board. "I was surprised you didn't mention me," I said gently. He blinked, caught. I didn't want to make it about one person," he stumbled. "It was for my parents. He stopped. You know. Do I? I didn't say it. I nodded slowly. I do know, I said. I wanted to make sure you did too. He looked away, uncomfortable. Mom and Dad have done a lot, he said, his voice going defensive. They've been there, they've sacrificed. I heard Sabrina's vocabulary. Sacrifice. Experiences. The story they'd told him was so polished he could see his reflection in it. I'm sure they have in their way, I said. I'm not here to fight you, I'm here to make sure we're telling the truth. He swallowed, for the first time unsure. Okay, he said. A question. Okay, I said, and let it sit.
Sabrina swooped in then, cheeks flushed, smelling like expensive orange blossoms. What are my two favorite people talking about? She sang. Ben, sweetheart, take a photo with your grandmother. She air-kissed my cheek, then steered him away. I watched my nephew dutifully pose, smiling the soft, polite smile of a boy becoming a man, while still doing what he was told. I left without dessert. I went home and wrote an email to Hawthorne's head of school, CCing the development director, in a tone so professional it could wear a suit. I laid out the facts. 10 years of tuition paid by me, donations credited incorrectly, a request for correction. I attached scanned documents and ended with, I look forward to your prompt response. Then I wrote a letter, an actual letter, on paper. Not accusatory, not a manifesto, just a clear, loving accounting of events. I slid copies of key receipts into a second envelope and wrote, open whenever you're ready, on the outside. I didn't deliver it. Not yet. Timing is everything. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. You should know that a woman who works 2 jobs to pay for a kid's school also tends to pay attention when numbers don't add up. I'd noticed little things over the years. Sabrina's fundraisers for the robotics club that somehow ended up with a professional photographer and a brand hashtag. Derek's consulting trips that coincided with resort towns during peak season. I knew those weren't crimes. I also knew they weren't free. When you look at your own budget like it's a puzzle, you start to see the pieces that don't fit in other people's pictures. 2 days after graduation, the head of school responded to my email. A careful note. They took donor attribution concerns seriously. They would review internal records. They appreciated my long-standing support. If I had read enough of these, I could practically recite the script. I clicked reply and wrote, thank you. Please note that any public representation of donations made by the Stone family that were in fact paid by me is inaccurate and should be corrected. If necessary, my counsel can follow up. Again with the counsel. Still no counsel, but it set the tone. I booked a consultation with a lawyer anyway. Her name was Lena, mid-40s, shoes too sensible to be trendy on purpose, which meant she was practical. I brought my fireproof box and watched her eyebrows climb as she flipped through a decade of my life. You're meticulous, she said. I took it as a compliment. I'm thorough, she nodded slowly. You're also kind of dangerous to people who take advantage of that. That, too, felt like a compliment. Lena confirmed the basics. Everything I'd done with the trust and 529 was perfectly legal. I could redirect funds as I saw fit. If Sabrina or Derek had represented themselves as donors for tax advantages, that would be a separate issue, one I had no obligation to fix for them. Do you want to fix their reputations? Lima asked, glancing up. I want to fix the truth, I said. Next, I called Hawthorne's development office to schedule a meeting. They put me on for Thursday morning. I arrived with a tidy binder labeled Attribution and Payments. The director looked harried but professional. The head of school wore a tie with tiny bulldogs on it that I tried not to take personally. I slid copies across the table one by one, narrating softly. This was the initial tuition deposit. This was the monthly payment for October. Here's the thank you letter from your office mistakenly addressed to Sabrina. Here's the pledge I fulfilled for the Arts Center. Their eyes flicked, then slowed, then got still. Miss Lane, the head of school said carefully, we appreciate your generosity. He paused. It appears we made some errors. I didn't smile. Yes, I said. Correct them. The development director coughed gently. We can update our internal records and, of course, correct the donor wall. Sometimes families prefer to list the household name. I cut her off with a raised hand, polite but firm. My name is not their household. My name is my name. They promised a new plaque. They promised a letter to the community acknowledging corrected attributions. I told him not to bother with the letter. I wasn't interested in a newsletter apology that would get skimmed between soccer practice reminders. I wanted the next time Sabrina and Derek walk past that wall to feel like stepping on a missing stair. I wanted the students and teachers who'd been fed a story about a glamorous, generous family to notice a different name. Not out of spite, out of accuracy, out of the kind of justice you can hang in a hallway.
On my way home, I stopped at the post office and rented a small box. One day, I told the clerk, I might have mail for a foundation. He didn't blink. This is a town where people still give change with 2 hands and call you hun. I went home and wrote the mission statement right then, at my kitchen table. The Lane Scholarship. Quiet, specific, targeted. For kids like Ben, who had the brains but not the safety net. Except the safety net would be real and not a photo op. The money from the 529 would go there in installments under conditions I set. One of those conditions was this: recipients had to write a letter of thanks to the person who actually funded their award, not to the school, not to their parents, to the person who wrote the checks. Gratitude is truth. I wanted to teach that as much as I wanted to fund tuition. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. Hey sis, could you send over the info for Ben's college payments? The counselor said to coordinate with you since you set something up. I stared at the screen until the text bubble timed out. Then I typed, I'll be handling the arrangements directly, and hit send. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared. Great! Can you CC me? Also, we're thinking of throwing a little send-off in August. Maybe you could do your famous brisket. I didn't respond. She followed with, Love you! Couldn't have done this without you! I put the phone face down and laughed, which surprised me. It wasn't a funny laugh. It was the kind you hear from a woman who just realized the door everyone held shut for years was never locked. 2 days later, the first message from Hawthorne went out quietly. The donor wall would be updated to reflect accurate attributions. No fanfare, no apology tour, just a simple administrative correction. I stopped by the school the following week to drop off brownies, which was code for to look at a wall. There, where the Stun family had been etched in jaunty font, was my name, Margaret Lane. I stood a moment, long enough to breathe in and out twice, and then I left. I didn't take a picture. It wasn't for a feed. I finally delivered the letter to Ben. I left it in his mailbox when no one was home. I didn't knock. Sometimes, the most generous thing you can give someone is the space to read the truth alone. In the letter, I told him that he was loved, that I was proud of him, and that facts matter. I wrote, If you want to talk, I'm here. If you're embarrassed, that's okay. Embarrassment is a compass. It points to where you learned something. I did not mention the trust. I did not gloat. I did not wag a finger. I trust him enough to put the pieces together. 3 days passed. Silence. Then a knock on my door around 9 p.m. I opened it to find Ben on my porch, hands in pockets, eyes rimmed red. Can I come in? He said, voice small in that way where you remember the little boy inside the tall frame. Of course, I said. I poured him tea, because that's what I do when I don't know what to do. We sat at my table, the same table where I had revoked a trust and remade my future. He unfolded the letter, now creased from being read too many times. He didn't know, he said. I mean, I thought, Mom and Dad, he trailed off. He looked up. Why didn't you tell me? I took a breath. Because I didn't do it to be thanked. And that was true.
And also because I thought the truth would find you. It took longer than I hoped." He nodded, swallowed. "I'm sorry," he said, so quietly it broke me a little. Then louder, "I'm sorry." He said it like he meant it. Maybe because he did. I put my hand over his. "I know," I said. "We can start from here." We talked for hours about school and college and the weirdness of being the kid of two people who turned their lives into a show. He told me about the pressure to perform, about the time Sabrina had redrafted his essay to help, about Derek's pep talks that were more about Derek than about Ben. He apologized for the speech again. We laughed about his cowlick. He ate 2 slices of leftover meatloaf, which is the truest apology language in the Midwest. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. "Mom wants to coordinate with you about the first college payment," she said. Careful. "She said you have the account. She told everyone at brunch that you set up a fund for me years ago." He said it like a lifeline, like maybe that meant he wasn't a bad person for not thanking me. "I did," I said. "I changed it." His eyebrows knit. "Changed it?" "Ben," I said gently, "college is a privilege, not a guarantee. You'll go, but you'll understand how you got there." He looked confused, then wary, then thoughtful. "Okay," he said slowly. "How?" I smiled, despite himself. "You've always been dramatic," he said. "That's your mother," I shot back, and he grinned. When he left, I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it, feeling that peculiar mix of grief and relief that comes when you tell the truth after lying to yourself for years. I slept the sleep of someone who had finally set down a sack she wasn't built to carry forever. In the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Lane, this is Jordan from Hawthorne's alumni office. We received notice of a new scholarship fund, the Lane Scholarship, and a request to consider a graduating senior for a bridge award. May we discuss?" I smiled at the word bridge. That's what I wanted to be now. Not a life raft people clung to when they weren't even trying to swim. A bridge, sturdy and clear, with a sign that says where it leads. I called Jordan back, and we had a frank, brief conversation. I made it plain that my scholarship wasn't for Sabrina and Derek to brand. It was for students whose support systems look like mine did, not like theirs. "And Miss Lane," Jordan said, hesitant, "about the donor wall, we've had some calls." Of course they had. Sabrina must have seen the correction. "Handle it professionally," I said. "That's your job." Jordan exhaled. "Yes, ma'am." That afternoon, Sabrina called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. The 4th time, I answered mostly because I was curious which version of my sister I would get. Penitent, furious, performative, or something new. "Mags," she burst out, skipping hello. "What is this about the donor wall? They switched the plaque. Why would you—" She caught herself. "I mean, what happened?" I folded laundry one-handed and held the phone with my shoulder. "They corrected an error," I said. "My checks, my name." Silence thickened. "We did this together," she said finally. "We're a family." I could hear her trying to assemble the words into a safety net again, the one she used whenever she wanted me to catch her mid-fall. "We are," I said softly, "and family tells the truth." She pivoted. Fine. This is so embarrassing. People will think we lied." She laughed brittle, which we didn't. Not exactly. "The truth is a scalpel. It cuts precise." "Sabrina," I said, "I'm not available for this conversation if it's about optics." She snapped. "You ungrateful!" Then bit it back. "After everything we've done for Ben, after all the sacrifices." The word again. I pictured her Instagram captions like pearls on a string. I kept my voice level. "I won't be discussing the trust," I said, which made her go still. "What trust?" she asked too quickly. "The one I set up," I said. "The one I revoked yesterday." She inhaled so sharply I could hear it. "You what?" "I changed my plan," I said. "It's my plan to change." She sputtered. "You can't do that. You promised." I folded another towel. "I promised myself I would do right by Ben.
I still am. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Sabrina went quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer and more dangerous. You always hated me, she said, going for the old wound. You were always jealous. I almost laughed. Of what? I asked. Your airline miles? She made a wounded noise. You're cruel, she said. I took a breath. No, I said. I'm finally clear. You confuse the two because clarity burns. She hung up. Derek texted 10 minutes later, let's be adults. The irony almost knocked me over. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone, made a sandwich, and sat on my porch with my cat, Pumpernickel, purring like a tiny engine. The sky did its big Midwestern summer show, a pink that looked like someone had diluted a sunset with milk. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my life belonged to me. Over the next week, the quiet turned into whispers. A friend from the PTA, technically I wasn't in the PTA, but you know how these things go, texted me, is it true about the donor wall? Another sent, Sabrina's on a tear. I answered neither. If there's a lesson I learned painfully, it's that you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to, especially when the invitation comes with a filter and a caption. Ben, for his part, sent a handful of messages that made me simultaneously proud and sad. He wrote, Mom is mad. Then I read the letter again. Later, I want to do this right. I told him, I believed you. Then I set up a meeting with the college financial aid office, not to sabotage him, to tell them the truth. The promised private funds would not be arriving in the manner previously expected. I met with a counselor named Miss Rowe, who wore a bracelet with little charms shaped like books. I explained my situation. I brought documentation. I used the tone that has gotten every bureaucratic task in my life completed correctly. She listened. She said, we can reassess his package. There are bridge grants for this exact scenario, but we'll need the student to file an appeal. I nodded. He will. She raised her eyebrow. He's lucky to have you. I smiled. He is, and he will know it in the right way. Before I left, I handed Ms. Rowe an envelope. What's this? She asked. The Lane Bridge Award, I said. Privately funded, one time, need-based, with a condition. She tilted her head. A condition? A letter of thanks to the person who actually wrote the check, I said. No public posts, no hashtags, just handwriting and truth. She smiled, quick and genuine. I like you, she said. I like me lately too, I replied, surprising us both. On my way home, I passed a billboard for a bank. Build your legacy. I laughed so hard, I had to pull over. Legacy. That's what Sabrina and Derek talked about at every fundraiser. Legacy was a word they liked to toss in the air like confetti. Turns out, legacy looks a lot like paperwork and courage and people who will sit at your kitchen table while the truth cracks you open and makes you new. I got home to a voicemail from the head of school. Ms. Lane, he said, we wanted to let you know the plaque has been updated. Also, as part of our corrections, we've adjusted our annual report to reflect your contributions appropriately. If you ever wish to speak at an assembly, I deleted the rest. I'm more dangerous quiet than I am with a microphone. That evening, Sabrina sent a message. You've ruined everything. I stared at it a long time. Then I typed, I've corrected the record. She replied, Ben's college. How could you risk that? I typed and deleted 3 things, then wrote, he will be fine. He's smart and hardworking. He has support. She didn't like that. She wrote, we had a plan. The we has changed, I replied, and put my phone away. What I haven't told you yet, and what I'll tell you soon, is that Sabrina and Derek's world ran on something more fragile than money. It ran on the story they told about themselves and the people who nodded along. Without those nods, the engine coughs. Without the fuel of borrowed glory, the machine seizes.
My revenge, in the end, wasn't the revocation of a trust. It was the removal of my consent to make their story run. And I haven't even gotten to the part where the school called the Stones to clarify donor records, or the part where Ben walked into my living room with a letter addressed to me in his own handwriting, or the gala that turned into an accidental reckoning. That's coming. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. The morning after Sabrina told me I'd ruined everything, Hawthorne called the Stones to clarify donor records. I wasn't supposed to know that, but in small towns, information travels like dandelion fluff, gentle but unstoppable. By lunchtime, Gloria texted a single line: "Your sister is practicing her church face at Starbucks." Translation: wide smile, eyes tight, voice pitched just a little too high. I pictured her in a white blouse, chin lifted, telling the barista she didn't want the foam because she couldn't possibly, which is how Sabrina turned no into performance art. At 3:07 p.m., I got an email from the head of school. "Ms. Lane," he said, "we wanted to let you know the plaque has been updated. Also, as part of our corrections, we've adjusted our annual report to reflect your contributions appropriately. If you ever wish to speak at an assembly..." I deleted the rest. I'm more dangerous quiet than I am with a microphone. Supper time, Derek called. "We need to talk," he said, skipping pleasantries. His tone was sales pitch dressed as authority. "About the school. They're confused. Obviously, there's been a mix-up. Why would they change the letters now?" I watched Pumpernickel stalking a fly like it owed him money and said, "Because they checked who wrote the checks." Silence. Then, lightly, "This hurts the family, Margaret." "No," I said, "this corrects the records. The only thing it hurts is a story that never should have been told." He sighed in the register men adopt when they think they're being reasonable. "Let's be adults." There it was again, that phrase they throw at me like confetti, condescension disguised as maturity. "We are," I said, and hung up gently. My days of explaining perfectly simple things to people who pretend to not understand were over. 2 days later, the head of school hosted Sabrina and Derek in his paneled office and walked them through the documentation. The plaque wasn't the only thing changing. The annual report, the thank you letters, every gala brochure that once read, "The Stone Family, Pillar of Generosity." All corrected. I didn't ask for the show. I asked for the math. But Sabrina lives for a stage, and when one disappears, she panics. That night, she posted a black and white Instagram story with a quote about envy wearing a sister's face over a picture of a wilted peony. No names, just dramatic italics. People sent it to me like it was news. It was not news. It was Sabrina. I kept doing the boring work that actually moves a life forward. I met with Lena again, my lawyer with the quiet shoes, and we drafted a simple letter to the school confirming, in polite law bird language, that revised acknowledgments should be issued forthwith. Lena is the practical type who treats drama like a mosquito, easy enough to swat, too small to mention. "They may need to notify your sister's accountant," she said, sliding a stapled stack toward me. "The school will handle it. You don't have to." "I don't want to," I said. I had no interest in playing IRS Avenger. I just wanted the truth to stand on its own 2 feet without borrowing my shoes. Then came by that weekend with a cardboard box of childhood detritus, trophies, medals, a scrapbook from 3rd grade with a glued-on macaroni border. He stood awkwardly in my mudroom like a boy who had grown too fast for his body and his life. "Mom's cleaning out," he said, setting the box down. "She said you'd want this." He shrugged, then reached into his backpack and pulled out an envelope addressed in his careful, slightly leaning handwriting. "Ms. Margaret Lane." I wasn't sure how to, he began. I put my hand on his forearm, the same way I used to when he was 8 and about to cry over long division. Bench it, I said gently, then say what's true. He read it aloud because we both needed to hear the words in the room. He thanked me for years of rides, for the clippings I mailed to him at camp about robots built from soda cans, for the way I had showed up without requiring applause, and this part made my throat hot, for teaching me that gratitude isn't a performance, it's an account. He apologized for the graduation speech. He said he had believed a story because it was shiny, and that shiny things often look like the truth if you squint. When he finished, he folded the letter into thirds and slid it back into the envelope as if it were made of glass. "Do I qualify?" he asked, with a wry smile. And for a second, he was 8 again, all freckle and hope. "For what?" I said, though I knew. "For the Bridge Award," he said. "I asked Ms. Rowe if I could apply. She said to start with the truth." My chest did something complicated then. Grief and relief are cousins. I said, "You qualify, on one condition." His eyebrows shot up. "I knew it. There's always a spreadsheet with you." "There is," I said, laughing. "And there's also one requirement. You don't post the letter anywhere. No hashtags, no tagging me. You can show your kids someday. You can't show your followers." He looked at me for a long beat and nodded. "Deal." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The Parent Council Gala was coming up, which in our town is half fundraiser, half costume party, half audition tape for people angling for the Most Photographed at Check-In award. Sabrina had co-chaired it years because she loved phrases like step and repeat. I wasn't planning to go. I had a robe, a couch, and a cat, my holy trinity. But then I got an email from the development director. "Ms. Lane, we'd be honored if you'd attend. We'll be recognizing longtime supporters." I stared at it a long second. Recognition had never been the point. Recognition also wasn't a sin. I clicked yes, then took my church sandals to the cobbler for a new heel. Gloria loaned me a navy dress that made me feel like I knew where I had put my keys. I pinned my hair back and wore the good lipstick. When I walked into the ballroom, Sabrina's eyes did that flash thing. Surprise, then calculation, then the cover. "Maggie, there you are!" She air-kissed like a hummingbird. "I'm so glad you could make it." Her voice was all foam, no coffee. The program listed special acknowledgement, Margaret Lane, between the silent auction and a student string quartet. Sabrina had paper-clipped a gold star next to her own name, co-chair, host committee, vision committee, and if she could have gotten away with it, moon landing committee. Derek hovered behind her in a tux, the kind of man who believes all wrongs can be righted with a firm handshake and a cigar. I found a table at the edge of the room, the back row of galas, and sat between the librarian and the junior varsity basketball coach. The librarian, Sandra, whispered, "It's about time," which I pretended not to understand. A student string quartet sawed the opening to Pachelbel's canon like they were trying to jailbreak it. People clinked glasses. The head of school took the stage. He did the thank you parade. Teachers, volunteers, people who had donated a basket filled with artisanal jams that would expire in 3 months. Then he cleared his throat. "We would like to thank a supporter whose generosity, often quiet, has been foundational to our students' success," he said, "Ms. Margaret Lane." A spotlight found me. Not bright, not blinding, just warm.
Applause began. Polite, then genuine, like people finding a rhythm they didn't know they'd been missing. I stayed seated because standing ovations always felt like a game of chicken, and lifted a hand once as if to say, "It's okay, you can go back to your chicken marsala." Sabrina clapped, smile plastered, eyes cool. Ben, in a borrowed suit bunched at the shoulders, looked at me from across the room and gave a small nod. Not a performance, an acknowledgement. It landed like a promise. Then came the twist Sabrina didn't see coming. The head of school invited a senior to the stage to speak briefly about the impact of quiet giving. It wasn't Ben, though I suspected he had been asked. It was Maya Hernandez, a girl from the robotics club with the halo of hair and the kind of concentration you can hear in her silence. Maya talked about a new set of programmable microcontrollers the team had purchased this year with a targeted tool grant. She said, "It came from someone who asked the coach for a list of precisely what we needed, then bought those things and dropped them off in plain brown boxes." She looked toward the edge of the stage where the coach, a gentle man with a gut and a heart to match, stood dabbing his eyes. It made us feel seen, not posted. Seen. The room hummed. The gala photographer shifted, unsure where to point his flash when the story was quiet. Sabrina's smile flickered. She had wanted to MC a narrative about families like ours giving back. Instead, the narrative had changed from ours to truth. After dessert, a lemon thing that pretended it never met sugar, the silent auction ended. Sabrina took the mic to announce top bidders. Spa day, lake weekend, private yoga session with a woman named Bryn who wore a headband like it was a tiara. Then she opened the golden envelope, yes, truly, that listed the donor of the luxury travel experience. She practically purred, "The Stone family," and waited for applause that would bounce back and coat her like lacquer. Deborah, the comptroller, stood up from the accounting table and walked briskly to the stage. I knew that gait. Paperwork emergency. She whispered to the head of school, who stepped forward and gently, carefully, took the mic. He said, "Apologies. A correction. The travel experience was donated by Premier Voyages, not by any individual family." He held Sabrina's eyes a beat too long for it to be nothing. People murmured. Derek's jaw slackened like a drawbridge. Sabrina laughed in that high, tinny register people use when they're crossing a high wire and the crowd gasps. "Oh, silly me," she trilled. But the room had shifted. You could feel sensibilities resorting themselves, like silverware in a drawer that's been lifted and set down slightly different. The collage of the Stones' philanthropic couple had lost a few pieces. The picture still existed, but you could see the white gaps where truth would go. I didn't gloat. My hands stayed folded in my lap. The victory wasn't the stumble on stage, it was the recalibration in the room. After the program, the head of school asked me to step backstage for a minute. He said, "We've issued the revised letters, and our auditors recommended we notify any parties who may have claimed deductions based on the earlier attributions." There it was, what I knew was coming but hadn't asked for. I said, "You'll handle it." He nodded. "We have to." When I walked back into the ballroom, Sabrina was waiting by the coat check, smile sharpened to a knife's edge. She said, "Maggie, a word." We stood near a ficus that had seen things. She hissed, "Are you happy? Embarrassing us in front of everyone." I kept my voice soft. "I corrected the record. The rest is gravity." She leaned in. "You always wanted to be me," like she was offering mercy. I almost smiled. "Sabrina, I worked 2 jobs for 10 years. There was never a day I wanted to be anyone but the woman who could do that." She flinched, like truth had weight. Then she switched tactics, as she does. She said, "Ben's financial aid appointment is Monday. We're going, and you're going to tell them the trust is back, or we will tell them you promised." I blinked slowly. "You won't," I said, "because you know I keep receipts." She went pale. That was not metaphor. Sabrina, tan in January pale. "You wouldn't." I said, "I wouldn't need to. You would be standing in a room full of professionals waving a story. I would walk in carrying paper." She spun away and almost collided with the gala photographer. The flash popped, caught, the smile slipping, the hand raised, the moment you can't caption away. I didn't order that photo. I didn't need it. My memory works fine.
I left early with the librarian and the JV coach, and we all split a cab because middle-aged thrift meets big night out practicality. When I got home, I made tea and wrote Ben a short note. Monday, I'll be there. We'll do it right. He replied, "Thank you." No emojis. He has learned that sometimes grown-up gratitude has no stickers. Monday, we sat with Ms. Rowe in a small office that smelled like plastic binders. Sabrina and Derek slid in 5 minutes late, the way people do when they think the room stops at their arrival. I had called ahead and asked Ms. Rowe to bring a second chair to the side table, where parents usually hover. Even furniture can tell the truth. This was not their meeting to run. Ms. Rowe was gentle but precise. "There was a change in the expected private contribution," she said, looking at Ben. "So we're reassessing your package. You may qualify for a bridge grant and work study. We can also apply a one-time award." She glanced at me. I kept my eyes on Ben. He sat straighter. "I can work," he said. "I want to." Derek opened his mouth, about to make it a story about character and bootstraps, I'd wager. But Ms. Rowe raised a palm without looking his way. "The student is speaking," she said. I felt a thrill in my ribcage. There are women everywhere who know when to put their hand up and stop the nonsense. We reviewed numbers. Then we reviewed expectations. "You'll need to budget and check your account weekly," Ms. Rowe said. "Textbooks are a money pit if you buy them new. Rent or get older editions. Meal plans look cheaper than they are. Don't let anyone convince you that credit cards are free money." Then nodded and took notes like the studious kid he's always been. We set up his direct deposit for a campus job in the engineering lab. I watched him type his routing number and thought, this is what growing up looks like. Courage and a checking account. On the way out, Sabrina caught my elbow hard enough to bruise. "We'll sue," she whispered. "We'll say you promised. Everyone heard you." I turned and let the full weight of 64 years of not being heard land in my gaze. "You won't. Because you like yourself too much as the glamorous giver to let the discovery process ask what you've given and what you've taken. And because I have every receipt." She dropped my arm like it burned. I called Lena and told her about the threat. She hummed. Lena's hum means I could draft this in my sleep. By that afternoon, Sabrina and Derek had a letter reminding them the trust had always been revocable, that there was no legal obligation, and that any further harassment would be met with appropriate action. Lena does not posture. She files. That night, Ben came over with a bag of groceries and a budget spreadsheet he tried to make himself, numbers marching hilariously into the wrong columns. We cooked. We fixed the spreadsheet. He learned the joy of leftovers and the alchemy of coupons. He said, "I didn't know how much things cost." And I said, "That's by design in some houses." And he looked down, then up, and said, "Not in mine anymore." I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. A week later, a letter arrived for the Stones on accounting firm letterhead. I didn't send it, but I knew what it said, because Deborah CC'd Lena at my request. Due to revised donor records provided by Hawthorne Preparatory, please review prior charitable deductions. If there is a sound for a narrative cracking, it is paper sliding out of an envelope and landing on a marble counter. Derek called their accountant, a patient man named Arjun, who had the weary energy of someone who has tried to talk reasonable people away from foolishness for many years. "We can file amended returns," Arjun said, practical. "It's not the end of the world." Sabrina wanted the end of the world. She wanted sirens and villains. She wanted me in shackles for daring to correct a line on a form. Instead, she got a form. At the same time, two of Sabrina's brand partners, one luggage company and one conscious athleisure brand, don't ask me why, emailed her asking for clarification about her philanthropy story featured in a sponsored post last fall. A polite sentence here, a request for alignment there. You could feel it. The slow pullback of people who trade an image when they sense the image is cracked. Sabrina went very quiet online for 3 days, which in her world is a sabbatical. While the Stones navigated their self-made storm, Ben and I built small good things. He got the campus job, and in a twist that must have tickled the angels, it was supervising maintenance of the very lab benches he'd once leaned over as a student. He learned where to buy used textbooks and who to ask for hand-down graphing calculators. We set up a weekly dinner, the kind you can move if there's a midterm, but not if there's a party. He brought laundry twice, which I allowed with the sternness of a woman who refuses to become a laundromat with hugs.
The Lane Bridge Award dispersed quietly. Ben's letter went into my fireproof box next to a photo of his 8-year-old grin. I asked the financial aid office to choose the second recipient, an anonymous student whose counselor wrote, "She's the first in her family to apply to college." I bought that girl her first semester of books and a pair of decent noise-canceling headphones because the world is loud when you're trying to climb. Sabrina couldn't stand the quiet. She called one night and, when I didn't answer, she left a message in that aching voice people use when they're trying to sound fragile and reasonable at the same time. "Mags, we're family. We should be united. Ben needs us. I know you took the trust. It's okay. We can figure it out. Just help me save face." That last part, so honest, I almost respected it, was the tell. This was never about Ben's education to her. It was about the mirror. I did not call back. I don't feed animals that bite me, and I don't feed narratives that eat the truth. The next blow didn't come from me. It came from Hawthorne's auditor, who, in the spirit of genuine compliance, recommended a small public note in the annual review clarifying corrected donor attributions. Not a scandal, not a diatribe, just a paragraph. The alumni newsletter printed it in the middle of page 3, between a profile of an English teacher retiring and a photo of the chess team looking oddly cheerful. But the paragraph did what paragraphs do when they are the first honest thing in a long time. It reoriented the room. People who had been flattered by Sabrina's attention saw their own complicity. Oh, maybe we clapped for the wrong person. Nobody died, but something did. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Derek called me, voice flat. "We've lost a deal," he said, and I waited. Sometimes silence is the only kindness I have left. He exhaled. "You win," he said like we were playing a game. I almost felt sorry for him then, standing in a kitchen that reeked of lemon cleaner because panic makes Sabrina scrub. "This wasn't a competition," I said. "It was a correction." The weekend before Ben moved into his dorm, we went to the hardware store where I still do books on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mr. Whitman gave Ben a discount on a toolkit, hammer, screwdriver, tape measure, because every young man should know how to put a shelf up properly without calling his mother. On the way out, Ben said, "I know I can't repay you." It wasn't self-pity, it was acknowledgement. I said, "You can." Not with money, with a life where you tell the truth even when it isn't flattering. He nodded like he was putting a nail into something structural. Move-in day arrived with the usual comedy. Elevators that acted like divas, RAs with matching t-shirts giving contradictory directions, Sabrina attempting to steam the wrinkles out of Ben's comforter in a hallway. Derek tried to install a TV. I hid the cords because nothing invites disaster like a screen on day one. Ben's roommate, a kid from Ohio named Theo with wild hair and a skateboard, walked in and said, "Sweet, a mom squad," and Sabrina inhaled it like perfume. "Aunt squad," I said, squeezing his shoulder. We made the bed, we labeled the bins, we hugged like people trying to calibrate for new distances. Sabrina cried conspicuously. I cried later, in the car, alone, because I've learned the difference between performance and privacy. On the way home, I stopped at a diner that still believed in pie and had a slice of lemon meringue that stood 4 inches tall, because you are allowed to celebrate building a bridge and watching someone else cross it. A week into classes, Ben texted, "Can you talk?" We FaceTimed, and I saw that particular collegiate pallor that comes from fluorescent light and existential questions. "I'm struggling," he said. "Not with the work, with the idea that everything we had was staged." I nodded. "That's grief." He stared at me. "What am I grieving?" I said, "The story. It was never yours, but it lived in your house. You get to write your own now." He breathed. "Okay." Then, because life is still life, "Do you know why my dorm microwave keeps tripping the outlet?" I did. We fixed it. The wiring was fine. The extension cord was trash. Sometimes it's not a metaphor. Sometimes it's just an extension cord. In October, the Parent Council held a gratitude breakfast for donors. I didn't go. I sent a donation to the library for large print copies of the book seniors pretend to read. The program listed sponsors in small type, alphabetized. L for Lane, S for Stone came later, not because they'd given, but because they'd volunteered to bring fruit. Sabrina posted a photo of a very dramatic fruit platter. Progress.
Around Thanksgiving, Ben came home with laundry and a paper he wanted me to read, Intro to Ethics, which made me laugh out loud. He wrote about attribution as moral clarity and quoted a philosopher I'd never heard of but liked immediately. He didn't turn it in as a confessional, he turned it in as an argument. I wrote, "Proud of you," in the margin, because old habits die hard, and because sometimes proud of you is the precise sentence a kid needs to find the stairs down from panic. Then, because life loves a finale, the school announced a year-end impact gala in December. Sabrina was not on the host committee. Instead, my mailbox held a cream envelope with my name in the kind of calligraphy that says, "I have opinions about ribbon." Inside, "We hope you'll consider saying a few words." I laughed and put the card on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a cow. I wasn't interested in standing on a stage, but I was interested in the planned reveal I knew was coming. Deborah called me quietly the week before the gala. She said, "As part of our audit, we're issuing a public update about corrected donor attributions and the establishment of new scholarship guidelines. It'll be in the program." She paused. "I thought you should know in case it affects your evening." Translation: Sabrina would not like it. The night of the gala, I wore the navy dress again because I am not a new outfit for every event kind of woman, and because it felt like armor. The ballroom buzzed with people practicing their "I'm so humbled" faces. I found a seat with the librarian and the JV coach again. We are a trio now, a quiet resistance cell made of comfortable shoes. Halfway through, the head of school took the stage with Deborah. They presented numbers that didn't make eyes glaze over, and then Deborah, bless her, read the paragraph. It was so simple, so clean, it might as well have been cut from glass. In reviewing our records, we corrected several instances of misattributed donations. We thank Ms. Margaret Lane for her decade of support and apologize for previous errors. Going forward, donor acknowledgments will reflect the name on the instrument of gift. We also celebrate the creation of the Lane Scholarship, which supports students with demonstrated need and a commitment to community truth-telling. The last phrase was mine. I cry when my language appears on nice paper. Sabrina stood up abruptly. For a heartbeat, I thought she might clap. Instead, she walked swiftly toward the doors, Derek trailing, as if the air had grown thin and she needed more of it. People didn't stare. They flicked their eyes, then returned them to the stage, which is a different kind of noticing. The room didn't follow her out. The room stayed. After, as people stacked plates and complimented desserts, Maya from robotics found me and pressed a folded paper into my palm. "Coach said you like letters," she grinned. "We won regionals. The microcontrollers helped." I unfolded it at my table. A list of part numbers and a note at the bottom. "We built something that worked because you bought exactly what we needed. That's our love language." I put it in my purse for the box later with a joy that felt like sunlight. At home that night, there was a message blinking on my answering machine. Yes, I still have one. It's a boundary and a vibe. "Maggie, it's Mom. Our mother lives in Florida and believes weather is a personality. Your sister called. She says you've been unkind. I told her I raised 2 smart girls. One of you would figure it out. Call me." I did the next morning. "Mama," I said, "I fixed a thing." She sighed, warm. "I know, baby," she said. "I always did wonder why you were so tired at Christmas." We laughed a long time. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone love you without asking you to lie first. There's one last piece you don't know yet.
At the year-end gala, tucked into the back of the program, was a small box, Inaugural Lane Scholar. It listed no name, just TBA, because the recipient chooses whether to be named. 2 days later, I got a plain envelope in the mail with handwriting I know now like my own. Inside, a short note. Aunt Maggie, you can print my name. Not for the applause, for the truth. Ben. It wasn't attached to a post. It wasn't for an audience. It was permission. I called Deborah. Print it next time, I said. He chose the truth. She said, I will. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because the final turn is still coming. The one where the story my sister sold gets recalled, where my nephew stands up on a different stage and names the person who paid and the price I was happy to pay, and where I finally get to spend my Tuesdays and Thursdays doing books for Whitman's without also underwriting a brand I never ordered. January came around, and with it that brittle Midwestern cold that makes your nostrils stick together the second you step outside. I like January. It's accounting weather. The holidays go quiet, the mail gets serious, and everybody sits down with a stack of envelopes and a pencil with good eraser. If you've ever balanced a checkbook in a snowstorm, you know what I mean.
Ben settled into campus life with a rhythm that felt earned, not staged. He texted me photos that would bore the internet and thrill a parent. A dented kettle he got at the thrift store for $3. The whiteboard over his desk full of equations and a little doodle of pumpernickel. A selfie at 7 a.m. looking like a man who had discovered that laundry waits for no one. You were right about used textbooks, he wrote once. $20 versus $120. I sent back, being right is my love language. And he sent a groaning emoji because there are some jokes that God puts in the world for ants. Sabrina tried a minor rebrand. Fewer posts about giving back, more about self-care and boundaries. You could practically hear her publicist, if she had one, and you know she would if she could, workshopping captions like she was frosting cupcakes, thick enough to hide the cake, thin enough not to crack. Derek posted a photo of a lake with a quote about resilience under it. When men don't know what to say, they rent words from strangers. One icy afternoon, I got a call from Jordan in Hawthorne's alumni office. Ms. Lane, they said, we're hosting a winter assembly for seniors and alumni. Would you consider sitting on a panel about how to give well? I laughed right into the receiver. You sure you want me up there? I asked. I'm allergic to glitter. Jordan chuckled. That's precisely the point. We're reteaching this place what giving actually looks like. I said yes, mostly because I love a captive audience of teenagers who think they've heard every adult speech and are about to meet an aunt who can out-stubborn concrete. The panel was scheduled for a Thursday, right after homeroom and just before the attention span of a 17-year-old checks out for lunch. I wore my county office blazer and the sensible flats that make me feel like I have diplomatic immunity. The auditorium smelled like pencil shavings and ambition. On stage, me, a retired shop teacher who'd set up a tool-lending library in his garage, and a woman from the local credit union with a voice like honey and an index finger that could shame a line of overdrafted accounts into repentance. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the mic and told the truth the way my dad taught me, plain, not fancy. I'm not rich, I said, I'm consistent. Heads popped up, eyes found me. Giving isn't glam. It's groceries with coupons and 2 jobs and a habit of showing up. If you want applause, join theater. If you want to change a life, learn to love receipts. The kids laughed, but I saw the teachers nodding like bobbleheads in a truth earthquake. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The story didn't require villains on stage. The story required vocabulary, stewardship, attribution, gratitude without witnesses. When the Q&A started, a boy in the 3rd row asked, "How do you deal with people taking credit?" I blinked at the bluntness. Teens are like that. They'll swerve around politeness and go straight for the wall. I said, you correct the record, quietly if you can, publicly if you must, and then you get back to work. Another hand shot up. What if it's your family? He asked, and the air in the room turned into a choir of held breaths. Then, I said, you decide whether you're protecting harmony or protecting the truth. Harmony is nice. Truth is necessary. You can live with a little noise. You can't live well with a lie. After, a girl with a braid clear down to her waist found me in the hallway.
My mom tells people she paid for my violin lessons, she said in a rush. My grandma did. Mom just drove me. Is that bad? I looked at her, a baby face with a spine. I said, it's not bad. It's sloppy. Write your grandmother a letter. Keep a copy. Someday when you're on a stage, say her name. She teared up, nodding. Sometimes the work is heavy and sometimes it's just a sentence and a stamp. Walking out, I passed the donor wall. My name sat there in simple black, unadorned by flourish. I reached out and touched the edge of the plaque, the way you might touch the frame of a family photo, not to claim it, to confirm it existed in the same world I did. A week later, Lena called. Sabrina sent a demand to reconsider via email, she said dryly, as if reading the label on a can. It has no legal force. I'll reply for the file. I sighed. What's it say? That you're cruel, Lena said, almost bored. That you've embarrassed her, that you promised a legacy. I did, I said, just not the one she wanted. Lena chuckled softly. You're a menace, she said with affection. Only to nonsense, I replied.
Around mid-February, the robotics team asked if I could review a budget before they submitted it to a regional grant. We keep getting dinged, Coach wrote. Apparently our miscellaneous is too miscellaneous. I sat down with the spreadsheet and my red pen, my favorite duet, and cleaned up numbers like a woman possessed. I swapped miscellaneous for fasteners, wiring, power supplies, safety glasses. Specificity is a torch. It burns fog. They got the grant. Not because of me alone, but because specificity makes you impossible to deny. Sabrina found out I was working with the team and showed up at practice with a tray of chronically moist brownies and a photographer. I watched from the bleachers as she gave the camera her encouraging mentor face, and the kids did that polite teen thing where they smile with only the bottom half of their faces. After the flash left, Coach smiled at me with all his teeth. She asked if she could sponsor team hoodies, he said, grinning. I told her we already ordered them. He looked down at his clipboard. From you. We both laughed, quiet. You don't have to outsparkle a person who thinks glitter is fungible. You just have to order hoodies on time. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. March crawled in with slush and tax talk. The Stones hired a new accountant. Arjun had apparently had enough of their theater, and this one was a fixer who specialized in narrative-friendly financials. There's a phrase. A friend slid me a screenshot, because screens have more cracks than an old porch, of Sabrina's group chat. We're doing a philanthropic reset. So excited to share soon. I've never seen 2 exclamation points look so tired. At the same time, Hawthorne launched a policy revision. Attribution must match instrument of gift. Clean, clear. No more household slippage. I sent Deborah a bouquet of grocery store tulips, which in my world is a ticker tape parade. She emailed back, no more velvet ropes for stories. She's a poet. She hides it behind spreadsheets. Then came the invitation that surprised even me. The Chamber of Commerce asked if I would speak at a luncheon about foundational giving. I asked if they had confused me with a thank. No, the coordinator said, honest as toast. We're tired of confetti. We want math. Well, hand me a microphone and a whiteboard. I adjusted my county office blazer and practiced not rolling my eyes while men in suits said synergy. The day of the luncheon, the room was half small business owners and half people who believe the word stakeholder is sexy. I told the story of a bridge, how scholarships aren't slush funds and donors aren't logos. I talked about verification and clean receipts and the joy of buying exactly what's needed instead of sponsoring excellence in the abstract. I watched the men who had skated for years on named gift mystique lean back in their chairs like someone had turned the lights up too bright. Afterward, the owner of the upholstery shop shook my hand and said, I always thought we were too small to be donors because we couldn't get our name on a wall. Now I'm going to pay for 5 kids' shop aprons. I could have kissed him. Practical generosity is my religion. On the drive home, I passed the billboard again, Build Your Legacy. And this time I didn't laugh. I just nodded at it like we'd finally gotten on the same page. Spring arrived like a sigh, muddy, messy, and hopeful.
Ben came home for a weekend with a duffel bag and a face that said, "Sleep is a suggestion." We sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, mugs steaming. "I think I'm ready to tell the story," he said. I put my mug down. "To who?" I asked, though I already knew. He took a breath that came all the way from childhood. "To everyone." He meant the school. He meant the community. He meant his parents in a room full of their audience. I looked at him hard. "Are you ready for the noise?" He nodded. He said, "I was raised in noise. I've never been raised in silence." That one took my breath. "Okay," I said, "then we do it clean." The opportunity arrived 2 weeks later, Hawthorne's senior honors night. Students give short remarks, thank yous, future plans, lessons learned. Ben had been asked to speak about integrity in leadership. Irony is a generous god. We planned his remarks at my kitchen table with note cards and the kind of editing that feels like sanding wood. Gentle, directional, patient. He wanted to name me directly. I wanted him to name the truth, not the person. We found the line together. I was raised by many people, but one person wrote the checks. For 10 years, she did it quietly, consistently, and without applause. Tonight, I'm saying her name not because she needs it, but because I do. Margaret Lane. He wrote about mistaking performance for gratitude and about learning that credit matters because it teaches you who to become. He did not drag his parents. He did not humiliate anyone. He did not make it a trial. He made it an accounting. We called Lena and asked her to look it over. Not because we were afraid of litigation, but because when you've spent years in a funhouse mirror house, straight lines can feel accusatory to people who prefer curves. Lena trimmed clause here, shored up a sentence there, and pronounced it good. "He's kind," she said after, which is the best verdict a lawyer can give, and the best inheritance a kid can claim. The night of honors, I wore a cardigan with hidden shoulder pads because some nights you need architecture. I sat toward the back again because exits are still my love language. The auditorium filled with parents in good jeans and kids in shoes that hurt. Sabrina was in the front row wearing something white that dared Gravy to touch it. Derek held an iPad like it was holy. Ben stepped up to the lectern, looked out at his world, and began. He talked about integrity being smaller than we pretend, about it being a habit, not a headline. He thanked Keachers by name because he's a better human than me. Then he said, steady as a man who had practiced saying his own name in a mirror, "For 10 years, someone in this room paid my tuition. Not my parents, my aunt. She worked 2 jobs and never asked for credit. I didn't thank her at graduation. That was wrong. Tonight, I'm correcting the record. Aunt Maggie, thank you." Heads turned like sunflowers, and I, who have lived my whole life proud of not crying in public, cried in public. It was not a scene. It was a clean thing. A plumber's fix in an emotional pipe. The applause came uncoached. Not loud exactly, but honest. Sabrina's shoulders went up. Derek's mouth went flat. I felt the noise and let it pass right through me like wind through a screen door. Afterward, in the lobby, Ben hugged me long enough to count for the years we were off by a story. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, worried. "I'm good," I said, which was true in the way bone-deep truth can be. Quiet, sturdy, plain. Sabrina approached, mouth set. "That was cruel," she said through teeth. "No," I said gently. "It was accurate. You made us look like—" She stopped, hunting for a word softer than what she meant. "Like people who didn't pay for something they told everyone they paid for," I supplied. She flushed. "You could have handled it privately." "I did," I said, "for 10 years. She blinked, breathing hard. "You've humiliated your family." "I've named it," I said. "Humiliation is allergic to light. Families aren't." She walked away. Derek followed, face like a door shut softly but firmly. Ben watched them go, the expression of a boy who realizes he cannot carry his parents' furniture into his own house. He doesn't have to. His lease doesn't include their couch. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and It was going to be glorious. A week later, Hawthorne mailed the annual Spring Appeal. On the back cover, small as a secret and neat as a lesson, was a box explaining their new policy. Attribution must match the gift. Thank yous go to the name on the check. There was a photo of Maya's team with their microcontrollers, and beneath it, equipment provided by targeted tool grants made in consultation with program staff. Somewhere, an Instagram brand deal sighed and lay down. Now for the fun part. Remember that luxury travel experience Sabrina had tried to claim at the gala? The vendor, Premier Voyages, was hosting a community night to promote trips for teachers. They wanted someone to speak about smart support for schools. Jordan recommended me. I told you, dandelion fluff. I said yes, mostly because I wanted the travel folks to hear a version of generosity that didn't require a step-and-repeat banner. The event was at the library, in the big room with glass walls and a carpet that hides coffee stains. I brought a stock of handouts labeled How to Give Like You Mean It with a checklist. Ask what's needed, buy that, get the receipt right, don't post it, sleep great, do it again. Sabrina arrived late, of course she did, with a friend who wore a hat indoors and called it a look. They stood in the back whispering, like high schoolers who had sat down in the wrong class. I gave my talk. People clapped. The rep thanked me and announced a new teacher grant that would pay for classroom supplies after the trip. She said, "We heard the message," gesturing to me, "and we're shifting. Progress is often just grown-ups doing their chores." Afterward, the rep pulled me aside. She said, "Funny thing," she said cheerfully. "We got emails from the Stones saying they'd spearheaded last year's travel scholarship. Our records show it came from our marketing budget." She shrugged. "Just wanted you to know we're clarifying our language moving forward." I nodded. "Good. Clarity is cheaper than confusion. Invoices prove it." By May, the Lane Scholarship had 2 recipients. Ben and a girl named Kira, who wrote me a thank you letter with a sentence that could fix a heart murmur. "I didn't know adults like you existed. Honey, you do now." I put her letter in the box and tucked a gift card in a note back to her RA for the emergency fund, because being 18 is expensive in weird ways. Sabrina, maybe feeling the heat of the truth warming her back, launched a Stone Scholars page on her site with a logo that looked suspiciously like a discount airline. It was all "coming soon" and "apply here" buttons that didn't go anywhere. The fine print said, "in collaboration with community partners." I typed stonescholars.com out of morbid curiosity and landed on nothing. You know what I did next, because you know me. I bought the domain. Then I redirected it to Hawthorne's official scholarship page with the new attribution policy and a big photo of the bursar's office. Legal, clean, and so tidy I wanted to frame the redirect notice. No lying, no impersonation, no noise, just a nudge toward the real thing. If Sabrina wanted her own scholarship, she could make one that worked for actual students. The door is always open to doing the right thing the right way. When she discovered the redirect, because of course she did, she sent a half-capitalized text that began with, "Are you kidding me?" and ended with a lot of dots like a Morse code for outrage. I replied with a single line, "Domains are $12, integrity is free." Then I turned off my phone and made chicken soup. I do not argue on the internet with women who think drama is cardio. The last day of school arrived. I'm a sucker for lasts. Last bell, last locker slam, last student sprinting because he forgot to turn in a book report. Hawthorne held a small ceremony for donors and staff. I brought brownies, dry, thank you very much, moist is for cake. The head of school made remarks, and Deborah read a list of updates to our practices. She thanked a long line of quiet names. Mine was one. It wasn't first. That felt right. I'm not a first. I'm a through line. Ben worked the event as a volunteer because tuition doesn't buy humility, chores do. After, he came over and stood beside me at the donor wall. We didn't say anything for a bit. We just looked. I used to think this wall meant people with money. Now I think it means people with receipts. Sometimes they overlap, I said, squeezing his shoulder. Sometimes they don't. We walked outside into a sunset that pretended it had time to be pretty. Sabrina was waiting by the front steps with a tight smile that said she had a plan. "Family photo?" she chirped. thrusting a phone at a passing sophomore who did not sign up for that job. Derek sidled close to Ben like proximity could transfer narrative by osmosis. "Say stone scholars," Sabrina trilled. Ben's smile cooled. "It's the Lane Scholarship," he said evenly. The sophomore froze, drama adrenaline in his eyes. Sabrina blinked. "We're a family," she said, the word like a talisman. "We are," Ben said kindly. "That's why we should tell the truth." He handed the phone back to the baffled child and walked toward me. Sabrina stood very still, then pivoted on her heel and walked away. You could almost hear a story stub its toe and go down. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. June brought graduations, barbecues, and the kind of humidity that makes your thighs audition for a role as Velcro. I took a few days off from the county office, sat on my porch with pumpernickel, and let my shoulders drop. I'd spent 10 years leaning forward. It felt good to lean back and watch a plan do its own walking. Then came the call I didn't expect. "Miss Lane," said a voice with the calm of a person who owns more cardigans than t-shirts. "This is Elaine, the board chair at Hawthorne. We're forming a small committee to advise on donor integrity guidelines. We'd like you." I laughed so loud my cat left the room. "Elaine," I said, "I'm 64. I nap like it's a hobby." She laughed. "We meet quarterly. There will be sandwiches." Reader, they got me at sandwiches. I said yes.
Our first meeting was in a conference room with bad art and great coffee. We wrote a protocol that would make a flim-flam artist break out in hives. Match name to instrument, verify employer matches, no attributions to households unless joint accounts, and a grace period for corrections that focused on education rather than shame. I insisted on a clause about student acknowledgement norms. Thank the person, not the performance. We drafted a one-page sheet for seniors on how to thank like a grown-up. It had a line that made me proud. "Gratitude is the receipt the heart issues for services rendered." At home, I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I looked at my budget, and instead of wondering what I could cut, I wondered what I could add. Not a cruise or a kitchen renovation, I'm not dead, but a window AC unit that didn't wheeze, a better mattress, a weekend in Door County with Gloria to look at water and judge other people's potato salad. I wrote it down in a notebook labeled "Nice Things" and underlined it twice. I don't need much. Turns out what I needed most was permission from myself. I still did books for Whitman's. I still kept the county office humming like a well-oiled stamp. I still made tea at 9 and went to bed when my knees told me to, not when Netflix did. But something quiet had shifted. People looked at me, in town, at the grocery store, in the pews, at the library, and their faces had lost that syrupy mix of pity and mild exploitation. They looked at me like a woman who had done a hard thing correctly and without theatrics, which, if we're honest, is 20% stubbornness, 40% documentation, and 40% deciding the applause you crave is the sound of your own spine clicking into place. There is one more turn to this story, one I didn't plan and couldn't have engineered if I tried, because sometimes the universe is the only party planner that knows your taste. It involves a summer picnic, a microphone I didn't want, and a sentence I had been waiting 10 years to hear from a person who'd finally earned the right to say it on a stage without flinching. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Summer in our town is one giant potluck with a side of mosquitoes. Every park bench has a cousin, every lawn chair has a story, and our 4th of July picnic is the Super Bowl of paper plates. Hawthorne always sets up a small stage near the bandshell, part pep rally, part donor charm offensive. I'd planned to bring Gloria's potato salad and my famous deviled eggs and sit in the shade with Pumpernickel on a leash. Don't judge, he tolerates it better than most men I've dated. I did not plan to be anywhere near a microphone. The morning of the picnic, I was cutting paprika diamonds into the eggs because I am who I am when my phone pinged with a message from Jordan in the alumni office. "Quick heads up, we're doing a short community integrity segment. Ben speaking. He asked if we could acknowledge the Lane scholarship in front of everyone. No surprises, just gratitude. You okay with that? I stared at my kitchen wall clock, the loudest, bossiest clock in North America, and felt that strange stillness you get when life lines up with a line you drew years ago. Okay, I typed. No confetti. They sent back a salute emoji. Children. The park was a Norman Rockwell painting if Norman had known about portable speakers and folding tables. I found a seat near the back, always near the back, always with an exit, and set my deviled eggs down like a sacrament. Gloria waved me over and whispered, "Your sister is in sequins at noon. That's a hate crime." I looked. Sabrina had chosen a white and gold sundress that said sailboat money and a hat big enough to generate shade for 3. Derek stood beside her, the human version of a Bluetooth earpiece. The program put the integrity segment right after the jazz band's opening medley. Ben took the stage in a red polo and jeans that didn't look like they cost anyone their mortgage. He's taller now, but he still rubs the back of his neck when he's nervous. He thanked the volunteers, the band, and the woman who put extra ice in the coolers because she knows what she's doing, which got him the kind of laugh you can't fake. Then he cleared his throat. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, because good habits get better with practice. 10 years of my education were paid for by someone who never asked to be named. Today, because this is a community event, I'm going to do what communities do when they're healthy. I'm going to name the truth. My Aunt Maggie, Margaret Lane, made my education possible. I didn't thank her at graduation. I am thanking her every chance I get now. And I'm proud to be the first Lane scholar.
Heads turned like birds following seed. Gloria grabbed my hand. "Stand up," she hissed. "No," I whispered. "Let him have his moment." He continued. "And the Lane Scholarship isn't about me. It's about how we give, specifically, quietly, and honestly. So today, we're also announcing the second Lane Scholar, Kira Davis. A small girl with steel in her spine and a braid like a rope climbed the steps and hugged Ben like she recognized the scaffolding of her life when she saw it. The standing ovation wasn't a roar, it was a deep hum. Honest applause has a different timbre. It sounds like people's shoulders dropping. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The MC took the mic, beaming, and now, she chirped, we'd like to invite Miss Lane up to say a few. I shook my head and stayed glued to my lawn chair. The crowd laughed when I waved her off like a shortstop calling a pop fly. She pivoted like a pro. Okay then. Then, would you mind handing your aunt the microphone? Traitor. He grinned. I sighed and stood. My knees popped like bubble wrap. I took the mic and did what I always do, told the truth without costumes. I don't have a speech, I said. I have potato salad and a folding table and a life I can account for. If you want to give, ask what's needed and buy that. If you want your name on a wall, write your name on the check. Either way, send a thank you note. People laughed and noted, and a man in a VFW cap yelled, Amen, which is the Midwest version of a standing O. I handed the mic back and sat down. We could have ended there. But life, like a stubborn jar lid, often insists on one more twist. Sabrina glided up the side of the stage like a woman who believed any microphone in a 5-mile radius belonged to her by divine right. She squeezed the MC's elbow and took the mic with a smile calibrated to magnanimous. Community. Isn't it wonderful when families come together? My spine bristled like a hedgehog. She turned to Ben. Honey, we're so proud of you. Then to the crowd, we too have always believed in giving back. In fact, we're launching the Stone Scholars Fund. Jordan moved faster than any administrator I've seen outside a fire drill. They stepped forward and, bless them, put a hand gently over the mic head without touching Sabrina. Apologies, they said, calm. We don't announce new funds that haven't been registered with the school. Happy to discuss once the paperwork is in order. The crowd didn't boo, this isn't cable news, but the air got very still. Sabrina laughed, high and brittle. Of course, we're in the process.
Process ends with a check, someone muttered behind me. Gloria. I pressed my lips together to keep from snorting. Sabrina scanned the audience for an ally and found Ben instead. He held her gaze like a man who had learned to stand in strong wind. "Mom," he said into the mic, voice even, "if you want to start a scholarship, that's great. It just needs to be real. Gentle. Surgical." He handed the mic back to Jordan. Sabrina stood there a half-second longer, then carefully tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and stepped away. Derek ushered her off with a hand at her waist. Sometimes the most devastating defeat is a quiet, administrative no. After the program, people filtered toward the food like ants with manners. Ben and Kira posed for exactly 2 photos, one with the robotics team, one with Coach, who managed to cry and hold a plate of hot dogs at the same time. I was loading paper plates with potato salad when a hush fell. Not heavy, just curious. I turned. Sabrina stood before me, eyes wet in a way that wasn't staged. She didn't have a mic. She had just me. "Maggie," she said, voice small. "I was awful." I blinked. It wasn't the sentence I'd braced for. It was better. "I was wrong," she said. And there it was, the sentence I had waited a decade to hear, the 4 words that grease the hinge of a broken door. People kept moving around us like we were a boulder in a stream. No spotlight, no orchestra, just summer air and the smell of grill smoke, and my sister, finally human. I believed the story, the one where we're the kind of family people write about and tag brands in. I liked how it felt. I forgot to ask if it was true. She swallowed. We amended the returns. That was humbling. She gave a short, ugly laugh that wasn't performative. We lost a partnership. Derek's mad and also relieved. Arjun, our old accountant, sent me a note that said, "Proud of you anyway." I cried over a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet. I almost smiled. Spreadsheets will make a woman honest if anything will.
"I can't fix the years," she said, "but I can start paying for things I say I'm paying for. We're setting up an actual fund, not to compete, to learn." She met my eyes. "May I ask you how to do it right?" There it was, the actual ask, not for a rebaptism in a public fountain, for a tutorial, my language. I took a breath. The woman who worked 2 jobs for a decade and who had every right to gloat did not. I set down my serving spoon, wiped my hands on a paper towel, and pulled a pen from my purse. "Meet with Jordan," I said, writing a name and a number on a napkin. "Bring a check. Ask Coach what the team actually needs. Ask Deborah how to do attribution correctly so your accountant doesn't need a drink. Don't announce it until the invoice is paid." I paused, and no step and repeat. Sabrina laughed, a real sound. "No step and repeat," she said, and folded the napkin like it was a treaty. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. "Don't go anywhere." Derek approached, hands in pockets, sheepish. "We've been jerks," he said, which from Derek is basically a soliloquy. I thought giving was branding. "I'm embarrassed." He stuck out a hand. "Thank you for not burying us." I shook it. "I didn't save you," I said. "Gravity did. I just stepped out of the way." They drifted back into the crowd. I exhaled and caught Ben's eye. He lifted his paper cup toward me. We clinked like we were christening a ship. If you're waiting for handcuffs or headlines, you'll be disappointed. Nobody got perp-walked. There were no sirens. The consequences were boring in the way adulthood is boring and therefore effective. Amended taxes, lost sponsorships, a reputation that now had to be built on invoices instead of Instagram. Sabrina quietly stepped down from the parent council. Derek stopped posting sunsets with quotes he didn't write. They took a year off from travel that looked like a catalog and took Ben to visit his grandmother instead, which, if you've ever sat at a Florida kitchen table while an 84-year-old woman explains the stock market and hurricane preparedness in the same breath, is a masterclass in character. The stonescholars.com continued to redirect to Hawthorne's actual scholarship page. 3 months later, Sabrina texted me a screenshot of a new domain, stonescholarship.org, registered properly, paperwork filed, a small fund that bought exactly what 2 students needed, lab goggles and meal plan gap vouchers, with receipts attached. "No step and repeat," she wrote. "No hashtags," I replied. "Promise." Ben finished his first year with a GPA that made my chest feel like a carburetor finally tuned right. He worked in the engineering lab, learned to patch drywall. Yes, I made him practice on my garage because that's love. And sent me a photo of his budget with the word balance circled and exclamations next to it, because even kids who outgrow emojis never outgrow the joy of making numbers behave. He came home for the summer and, this part made me cackle, taught a free Saturday morning budgeting for beginners class at the library to high school juniors and very patient parents. He opened with my line, "Gratitude is the receipt the heart issues for services rendered." I sat in the back and cried like somebody had just played Pomp and Circumstance on a kazoo. The Lane Scholarship grew, not because I found money in a couch cushion, but because other quiet people recognized their reflection and asked if they could help. A retired nurse sponsored textbooks for pre-nursing students. The upholstery shop guy bought shop aprons. Mr. Whitman underwrote a toolkit for students moving into dorms so nobody had to use a butter knife as a screwdriver. May it never be so again. We built a small constellation of practical mercies that glowed steady instead of burning flashy and burning out. I made progress on my nice things list. Gloria and I went to Door County, ate cherry pie like it was a vitamin, and judged potato salad with the rigor of Olympic judges. I bought the good mattress. I replaced the wheezing window unit. I planted zinnias along the front walk and watched hummingbirds do their tiny fighter jet thing around them. I learned to fall asleep without running tuition numbers in my head like sheep that owe me money. In September, Jordan asked if I'd speak at the school's opening assembly for the seniors. 5 minutes, they pleaded. One rule. Tell them how to thank people. I wore my county office blazer because she has seen me through many a war, and told those kids what I wish someone had told me when I was 18 and thought gratitude was a Hallmark card. Say the person's name. Say what they did. Say what it let you do. That's it. Don't gild it. Don't post it. Mail it. Then live like you meant it.
After, in the hallway, I found Sabrina waiting. She looked quiet, not dimmed, just turned down from 11 to a reasonable volume. "We funded lab stools," she said. "Coach said the kids were kneeling on the floor to solder sometimes. We didn't know." She shrugged, awkward. "We didn't ask." "You did now," I said. She nodded. "We got a receipt," she added, and I laughed and pulled her into a hug that lasted exactly as long as felt right, and not a second more. Here's the part people always lean in for: the tally, the revenge ledger, the scoreboard. You want numbers? So do I. 10 years of tuition, paid by a woman in sensible shoes who learned to love year-old lipstick and day-old bread. Paid. No regrets. One revocable trust, revoked at the precise moment it needed to be, converted into a scholarship that now buys specific things students actually use. Clean. A donor wall corrected. An annual report rewritten. A policy changed. Name on the check equals name on the plaque. Permanent. Taxes amended by people who had to admit in black and white what they actually gave. Uncomfortable, but educational. Sponsorships paused or lost for folks who learned branding is not character. Consequence, not catastrophe. A boy who grew into a man who can stand at a microphone and say, "I was wrong," and then live like he was right to say it. Priceless. Yes, I said it. Sue me. Actually, don't. Lena is expensive. A sister who learned that apology is a sentence, not a lifestyle. We are better than we were. We are not best friends. We are family. That's enough. And me? I got my life back with interest. I stopped underwriting a brand I never ordered and started investing in a community I actually live in. I went from being Ben's aunt who bakes brownies to being Maggie who knows how to get your kid the exact thing they need without a song and dance. I'll take it. People ask if I'd do it again. The paying, the exhaustion, the years with a second job and a first-class binder of receipts. Yes, I'd do it again. With one change, I would correct the record sooner. Not for the applause, for the health of the story. Because stories like bodies get sick when you feed them junk. I didn't ruin anyone. I removed my cooperation from a lie and watched gravity finish the job. That's not destruction, that's housekeeping. And sometimes housekeeping is holy. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. And now, your turn. What would you do in my place?
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.